Okay, everyone, in this video I will do this question here. This will basically be the last video for chapter 17. Okay, so Argon Energy, oh boy, Argon Energy Partners has issued rights to its shareholders. The subscription price is $18, and 4 rights are needed along with the subscription price to buy 1 new share. The stock is selling for $25. Rights on. What would be the value of 1 right? This is pretty straightforward. The share is rights on, so I just take $25, I minus the subscription price, and I divide by n, the number of rights required, plus 1, because it's still rights on. If it was rights off, we would just divide by 4. And that gives me 7, I believe, divided by 5, $1.4 for each rights. So now the actual price of the share is still 25. It is 25, but it includes 2 components to the price of that share. There's a $1.4 for the right, and there is plus 25, a $23.6 for the share. When the stock goes X right, what would be the new stock price? Well, I already kind of calculated that. The new stock price should be 23.6, okay? Because there's $1.4 for the rights, and the value for the share itself is 23.6. Van Harper has $23,600 to invest. How many shares could he buy? Pretty straightforward. I take the 23,600 and I divide it by the price of a share. I'll just multiply this by 100. That should be correct. And I divide it by 23.6. You can buy 100 shares. I should totally have known that because I just multiplied it and divided by the same number basically. But okay, you could buy 100 shares. How many rights could he buy? Well, 1 right is worth 1.4. And by the way, here in these questions, you have to be aware, right, that these questions have a lot of unwritten assumptions. I could say in a question here, I could say like, oh, later on the value of a share change, and in the real world that would happen. But here, there's nothing telling me that the value of the share changed. So, for example, right, I could tell you like, okay, later on, like if the price of these shares change, right, the value of the right will change. So that when the firm goes X right, the value of the share might be slightly different than what I calculated here. So you do need to be careful with that, but here there's no indication that the price of the share has changed, so I just keep going with these initial values that I calculated. So how many rights could he buy? Did I do that already? Okay, so he has $23,600. I divide it by 1.4, and I get that he could buy 1.4 because that's the value of the right. I get that you can buy 16,857.14 rights. Now, I like to keep decimals, so I'm going to keep them in the quiz. Because it's on D2L, you have to keep the decimals also. But in the real world, right, obviously this person would probably only buy multiples of 4 of rights. They probably wouldn't buy something that is not a multiple of 4, because if you get to the date where you have to exercise your rights and use them, right, the exercise date, and you don't have 4, then you can't use the 3 rights extra that you have. But I'll keep the decimals because I like to work that way. But yes, you could make an argument that you would have to have a multiple of 4. This wouldn't make sense anyway. Okay, and you can't have 0.14 of a right either. Okay, this is hopefully pretty straightforward. The next step, the next 2 questions, is highlighting something that we will start to talk a lot about as we move after chapter 18, we're going to move towards doing derivatives. And this is something that will come up a lot when we talk about derivatives. And that's why I brought it up here. Okay, I want to showcase rights are derivative-like financial instrument, right? And so one thing that is interesting with derivative, and especially options, is that they create a lot of leverage, okay? And that's something we will discuss. But they do create a lot of leverage. What does that mean? That means that even though you don't take leverage when you buy an option or when you buy a right, or you don't have to borrow money, it will do a bit the same impact with your rate of return. And I didn't really have any course or class here in this class where we discuss this, but generally speaking, you can use leverage to amplify your return, right? It's not exactly like that. If you took 220, you probably discussed it a bit more. But for example, if you have, right, your portfolio is made of 50% equity and 50% debt, if you make a 10% return before considering your leverage, you would basically make roughly a 20% return. Unfortunately, that works both ways. If you lost 10%, you would basically lose 20%. Okay, and it's actually a little bit more complicated than that, because now I'm ignoring the interest rate you need to pay on your debt, but it's roughly in that area. And so what's happening with rights is it does the same thing. It amplifies your rate of return because it's kind of a derivative. It's kind of like an option. If you don't want to use them, you just don't use them and you let them expire worthless. And for that reason, we're going to see the same impact here. And that's what these two questions are trying to showcase. Okay, the first question. Suppose that the price increased to $25 per share. Okay, how much money will you make, right, or Van Harper make if he bought the share? Pretty straightforward. He bought 100 shares. The price of a share was 23.6, so he's going to make 25 minus 23.6, right? And he bought 100 shares. I'll multiply that by 100. And he made $140. Is that correct? Yeah, that's one. Should be correct. 25 minus 23.6. Yeah. Okay. Now let's see what would happen with the rights. Okay. If the share price goes to $25, now the shares are X right. So the value of a right would be the price X right minus the subscription price divided by 4. Or n, I should have written n here, I just wrote all the variables, divided by n. Okay, and the price X right is now 25, the subscription price is 18, and we divide this by 4. So if I'm not mistaken, that's 7 divided by 4, it gives me 1.75. Okay, the price of the shares went up by about $1.4, and the price of the right went up by 35 cents. But I was able to buy a lot more rights than I was able to buy share. So now let's take this new price for my rights. I'm trying to find a spot where I can write and you'll be able to see. Let's minus the old price for my rights. That was 1.4 was the price of my rights when I bought them. And then let's multiply this by how many rights I managed to buy. And I get that I basically make $6,000. I won't write 6,000. I really don't want you to do that in the quiz, so I shouldn't give you those habits. 5,899.99. So basically 5,000. Basically, we made basically $5,900, right? And what I want to contrast is the difference in return. the price of the shares went up by $1.4 from 23 to 25. If I only spent my money on shares, I would have only made 1.4. If I spend my money only on rights, I make $5,900. A lot more money. Okay, but again, it's leverage. So we will notice the same effect when the price of the share decrease. We're going to see that we lose a lot more money with the rights. And think about it, in the worst case scenario, if the price of the shares go below $18, our rights will be worth 0. The rights can never have a negative value. I know the equation looks like it could be negative, but the rights can never have a negative value, right? Because you don't have to exercise them. So if they would have a negative value, you just don't use them. Okay, so let's calculate now the last question. Suppose the price went down to 22. Well, I bought the shares for $23.6. That's the price we used when we bought them, and when we bought the rights, it was 1.4. So we bought them for 23.6. They are now worth 22, and we have 100 shares. So how much money did we lose in this case? We lost $160. Okay, what if we had spent all of our money on the rights instead? Well, the rights, their value when they're X right, will be the price X right minus the subscription price divided by N. The price X right is $22. The subscription price is $18 divided by 4. This is 6 divided by 4. Is that correct? 22. No, that's woo boy. Mental math. 22 minus 18 is 4. So that's 4 divided by 4. That gives me a value of 1. Okay, but I bought my rights for 1.4 each. Okay, so they're now worth $1. I bought them for 1.4. And I bought 16,857.14 of those. So how much money did I lose? 1 minus 1.4 times 16,857.14. I lost $6,742.86. Again, notice the difference. If I buy the shares with my 23,600, I'm in these two scenarios, I'm either going to make $140, or I'm going to lose 160. With the rights, I'm either going to, with these two scenarios, if the share goes to 25, the share price goes to 25 or 22, I'm either going to make roughly $5,900, or I'm going to lose, I forgot the negative here, I'm going to lose 6,742. Hopefully everyone can see that using rights magnify my return, right? There's a lot more variability. There's a lot more uncertainty. If we were to talk about the standard deviation, right, of how much money I'll win or lose, it's much, much higher with the rights than it is with the share. Okay, and that's something we will probably discuss again when we talk about option, but that is a feature of options in general. A lot of young students who you're going to tell me you're not young, but a lot of young individuals who invest tend to often really like instrument like options because there's potential for huge gain. But remember that with that comes the potential for huge loss also. Okay, thank you very much.